This all started with this tweet, right? So Monte Cristo was talking about how 1v1 esports is sick, and he thinks that with StarCraft being out of the picture, team esports just aren't quite the same. And then Proxy Wolf said this thing, Melee's massive decline. He said, also with Melee's massive decline recently, there's a huge void in the 1v1 department in general, blah, blah, blah. I was talking about StarCraft 2. And I was like, damn, is Melee really on a decline? Like, what is he referring to here? And I really did want to know, because I was thinking, look, Proxy Wolf, he's an esports caster, lives in South Korea, and he's not a Melee player or a Melee fan, but he's a fan of esports in general. And if he thinks Melee's on the decline, maybe there's something to learn from that, because I don't really think Melee's on the decline. I was talking to Hotbit again, who's from Beyond the Summit, and Hotbit was like, Wolf doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm like, okay, well, but sure, maybe he doesn't, but if casuals think that we're on the decline, could that be deterring new blood from entering the game that would otherwise be playing? I'm like, I don't fucking know. So I kind of wanted to dig in this a little bit. And I made this tweet because this guy replied to me, and he said, can confirm, I am casual. I thought Melee died with COVID and Nintendo interference. I will say, first and foremost, I agree with this. It is quite likely that with Slippy, the competitive Melee is its largest player base ever. Okay, so here's the thing, and there's this really interesting and weird dichotomy that's happening with Melee right now. I have been playing more Melee than I ever played as a Melee player ever post Slippy. I think that is a common sentiment. Everyone I know who like works in esports that like kind of is into Melee, like everyone I talk to is like, dude, I'm playing way more Melee than I've played ever. I'm running into old school heads on Slippy all the time. I run into people that don't enter tournaments anymore all the time. I ran into this guy, Crack, Q-R-A-Q. He's a Luigi player from Idaho that I housed when he came to Washington for a tournament 12 years ago. I haven't heard of Crack in years. I thought he moved on. I thought he had probably had a kid or something. D.A. West, Eddie Mexico. You know, I've run into people from every era of Melee on Slippy. So people, Melee players, I think, are probably playing more Melee than ever, I think, in general. People you thought quit. Even I was talking to Silewolf. Silewolf said, shit, maybe I'll start entering tournaments again. You know, like, everyone, it feels like, is playing a lot of Melee. And yet, there's this kind of viewpoint or misconception or whatever you want to call it with kind of the more casual audience that the viewership is down or something. I don't really super duper duper know. Like, because I think the people that do play Melee are like, Melee's popping off right now. You can go in unranked and you can get a match in fucking seconds. You always get a match in seconds. I don't care if it's 5 a.m., you get a match in seconds. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting because there's this weird dichotomy, but I want to address this because I think that, you know, I think that there's potentially a missed opportunity here. If there are a lot of casuals that think, oh, Melee's dying, I shouldn't learn this game. Look, I just put a video out a couple days ago on my YouTube. The video is called The Infamous Toph Origin Story, and this video is basically how I started playing Melee in 2008. Now, when I started playing Melee in 2008, the game really was dying. I really did think Melee was dying, and I was, well, it wasn't dying, but it was kind of dead. You know, I'd go to locals and there'd be 8 people. I have never seen Melee be as dead as it was as when I started playing, ever. I started right after Brawl came out, right around the time Brawl came out. Melee has never been as small as it was when I started playing. It has always been bigger than that, and by a significant amount. Brief note on viewership. So Smash Summit 9, which was it was the last Smash Summit in person, not Smash Summit 10, that was online. Smash Summit 9 was the most watched Smash Summit. 63K viewers at peak. So you can't really say just from that, because, you know, Proxy Wolf was basically saying, hey, I thought Melee was, my impression was it was declining even before the pandemic. So this made me realize there's actually a lot to unpack here. He's not just talking about, oh, the pandemic killed Melee off or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Nintendo C&D, Big House, and that was like, you know, that was the biggest news in the Melee community recently. I think that was, for a lot of the people, like as I'm looking through kind of all the people that replied to me, when I was looking through all the people that replied to me, I was kind of thinking like, what are some of the themes? And one person did point out, the biggest piece of news pertinent to Melee recently was the Nintendo C&D at Big House. So it's negative, not negative in terms of negative for our game. It's not, doesn't make us look bad, but it's like someone might see that and think, oh damn, Melee really can't have big tournaments anymore. Melee, the most recent big tournament got C&D'd, so maybe their competitive scene is just dead right now. All the big tournaments aren't happening. Again, the biggest tournament that actually happened recently online was LACS 3, I guess that was, and I mean it was huge, good viewership for sure, but it was Ludwig viewership, and you know, obviously doesn't come close to our in-person tournament numbers. So, I mean, I get it. I do see that viewpoint. I do understand it. I don't know, man. I was on Twitch 2 a.m. last night. There was 200 viewers in the entire Melee category. I'm down to address this, too. You're right. Melee does not do well on Twitch, typically. Generally, if Mango's not streaming, if Levin's not streaming. But I don't think that's a fault necessarily of the game. I just don't think we have that many big streamers that are all the time. I'm going to start trying to address that a little bit. We don't have a ton of people streaming Melee all the time. We don't have huge names in the world of esports and the world of streaming. Besides only a couple people, you know, Mango, Leffen, None. You have to shout out None, at this point. Zane, of course. IBDW's getting there. Axe. So, I mean, we've got streamers, but, you know, it's usually if one of the big guys aren't on, Melee people are just not really watching. I think people just rather play than watch Melee. Yeah, 100%. I think people literally, I mean, but it's always been like this. This is not a new thing. It's just kind of how FGC games in general are, honestly. If I go to twitch.tv/ let's go to the director. But I mean, it's literally always been this way, right? Like, even in Melee's fucking heyday, Melee was never that big on Twitch. Like, unless there was a tournament. And if there was a tournament, you would get 100,000 people. If there's no big tournament, or tens of thousands of people. 100,000 if it's like Genesis or Evo, that's it. There was no tournament. It's always been this size. That's just never changed. I mean, this is the director right now. Wizzy's on, he's got 83 viewers. That's actually like not that bad for Wizzy. None probably went live pretty recently. He'll get like upper hundreds. Nez is on for 12 hours a day, okay, if I go to like Street Fighter 5, like Daigo pulls big numbers for sure. Team Spooky, there's a tournament going on. Brian F. So 5K viewers, yeah, I mean, that's pretty good, but they got, it's like, if you look past, Team Spooky and Brian F, I mean, it's just FGC games in general. That's kind of how they are. I don't know. I feel like if it's not a couple big people on, you just don't get that. You don't see that huge of numbers. If I go to Dragon Ball Fighters, are people playing Dragon Ball Fighters right now? I don't know. I know they had a new patch relatively recently. It's like, okay, 2K viewers and Hook is live, right? Hook is live. And look, this is exactly what the Melee directory looks like. You got your one or two big influencers who are big relatively big streamers as far as the game's concerned, and then it's usually 10 20 viewer Randys, and that's chill. I don't know, that's just kind of how the game's always been. That's how the genre's always been. I don't think that means anything about the game stagnating. I really don't. Is the size of Melee on Twitch the fault of the players not being popular, the game not being stream friendly enough, or another factor? That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. I think a lot of it is that if there's no tournament, I think there's no narrative. I think it's hard to have a narrative with just grinding unranked. I do think there's going to be, and this is something that's brought up, someone replied to me and said, I think once rank mode drops, that'll be a big content farm. Tournaments give top player storylines, but ranked is a personal journey that anyone can jump on. So, the best content that we ever did, we as in me and people close to me, did for this sort of thing was the reads, right? And the reads would, at least we attempted to put some sort of storyline. We had the Spencer account and we were trying to rank up the Spencer account on smashladder.com. You gotta have some sort of storyline. If there's no storyline, it's not that interesting. People aren't gonna tune in. Slippy Unranked was doing pretty good that 1 week or 2 weeks that everyone was doing, speed runs to 20 wins on Unranked, and people were trying to get people to rage quit and all that stuff. That was the best you ever saw Unranked streams do because there was an actual storyline. It's not as accessible or widespread as League of Legends and Among Us Counter. Well, I mean, yeah, it's never gonna be that size, but that's okay. This isn't about can Melee be League of Legends size esport or whatever. This is about casual viewers seem to think we're in a decline. Are we in a decline? And that's specifically kind of what I'm addressing here. Let's enumerate the actual things that are going on here. Because again, Proxy Wolf is not just talking about the pandemic. He's also talking about viewership as a whole even before the pandemic. Perhaps Ultimate cannibalized it a bit. I mean, this is a worry. Remember Genesis, what was the most recent Genesis 7? People were thinking, oh man, all the viewership's going to Ultimate. But the funny thing was, and this was a story at several majors pre-COVID. Remember, Pools, Ultimate always had better viewership. Pools, even top 128, top 64. But top 8, it always felt like Melee got the better top 8. And it always felt like people cared more about the Melee top 8. It always felt like the viewership peak was in the Melee top 8, which was really interesting. And I think that totally speaks to how top heavy, for better or for worse, I think that speaks to how top heavy our scene kind of is when it comes to what people care about. At the end of the day, it is the Melee players that have the star power. If you look at Twitter follower numbers, you can even see it, right? In fact, what is the biggest Smash Ultimate set of all time in terms of viewership? It's Leffen versus Salem. Leffen versus Salem is the biggest, the most viewed, I believe, to this day. I think this is probably the most viewed, and it's probably the most hype in the venue as well. 700,000 views on this video. And you can see what the crowd, I mean, grand finals from this same tournament, SSC 2019 grand finals. Samsora versus MK Leo 5, so 200,000 fewer views than Leffen versus Salem because there was beef. There's a storyline. That's what people latch onto. And Leffen, a guy like Leffen, he's got that star power that makes crowds like that form, right? I think that's kind of inarguable. When you think about the biggest the biggest people in Smash, it's the Melee top players. Melee reaches 96.7K viewers during the Big House 9 finals. Big House 8. 62,000 for Big House 8? Is this... Big House 8, which is one of the biggest Melee tournaments of the year, paid it to 62,000 viewers. Yeah, so Big House 9 was way bigger. Big House 9 did Mango versus Zane. So, I mean, there's like a legitimate argument here that without COVID, Melee might have, and it might post-COVID, I think still will. There's like a legitimate argument. I mean, people always used to say viewership dropped off hella hard when Mango got knocked out of a tournament. Mango and Zane are the two best players right now. I think that might really provide an uptick to Melee viewership when tournaments are back, when offline tournaments are back. I doubt that'll be a factor, says the Blur. Blur, I got a question for you. Hey, did I don't know if we ever got to the bottom of this, Blur, while you're in chat. Blur, was this you? Are you in my prime, the red Marth on Slippy? Because a buddy of mine posted this clip, and he was wondering if this was you. Because in my prime, it's a red Marth. Okay.
I feel like one of us isn't clicked in. Could be wrong.
Is that you, Blur? Probably not me. You know I got copycats. Do you have copycats, dog? Are you sure? I watched you when you lost to Buddha Knight's Kirby. The first thing Kirby Kaze said on the broadcast was, "All right, the way you play Kirby Marth is you roll into him and you do an up tilt, and you kept losing to roll in up tilt. So if you're losing to roll in up tilt, you're definitely going to lose to roll in rest." So I'm just thinking, like, when I think of your set with Moon Knight and this, there's a lot of similarities. So I thought it has to be. If I had to bet, I feel like Melee has a ton of hidden hype potential in regards to perceived popularity. I ran BMR1, helped run BMR2, Badman Rising, cool. And when we announced PP was coming to team with Lozer, within 2 hours, there was an article on ESPN about it, which I think speaks to regards. See what I'm saying? PP, that's a big name in Melee. The biggest names in Smash are still, the biggest names in Smash that everyone in the esports field knows are the best Melee players. Melee just has this thing. I think it's probably because of how fucking difficult the game is. It's just Melee has this perception of being a difficult goddamn esport, and the sorts of people that people want to watch when it comes to these really difficult esports is the top players. Like that's kind of how it's always been, and it's a blessing and it's a curse, I think. In a similar fashion, I think we have a thing where people care about the biggest tournaments. And the biggest tournaments, just because of circumstances, aren't happening. I think Melee is becoming harder to commentate, though. You do? I don't think Melee is becoming harder to commentate. That's weird. Well, my opinion here doesn't mean anything. You're the commentator. So, if you think it's harder to commentate, I mean, you must be a commentator, so you must be, you know what I mean? You must know what you're talking about. All right. I guess it's harder to commentate now. That sucks. I hope the commentators can do a good job. I hope they can figure out how to commentate it. It's like a hard game to commentate or whatever. So, in terms of the complexity of what is happening on stream, yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's fine. I don't know. I think we're better. I think you know, unironically, I think the commentators are also better at commentating now. I think it's like when I watch the most recent tournaments, the ones that Vish and Chillin commentated, the ones that I commentated. If I rewatch the footage, I feel like the quality of commentary has only gone up since 2015, 2016. Because Blur doesn't commentate anymore. I couldn't tell you if I've gotten any better at commentary in the last 5 years. Blur, there's a lot of things I couldn't tell you if you've gotten better at the last 5 years.
I feel like one of us isn't clicked in. Could be wrong.
Hey, look at the recovery here. Ah! Should have curled. If you curled, you would have made that back. If you curled, you would have made that back. If only you curled, dude. You needed that curl, dude.